Call this meeting to order. Roll call, please.
Mayor Louis Trujillo.
Present.
Councilor David Romero.
He is excused.
Councilor Barbara Casey.
Present.
Councilor Michael Montoya.
Present.
Councilor David Olivari.
Here.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You do have a quorum.
Please stand for Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'd like to take a couple of minutes, or seconds, to reflect on all the help that we've been given with the U.S. Forest Service and the State Forest Service. I'd like to recognize the firefighters for working so hard and jumping on the second fire that just burst open yesterday. And just thankful for everybody, and thank God no houses were burnt. Lots of area was burnt, but and we're just hoping for a quick end to these winds and an end to fire season even before fire season starts. So if we could just take a moment of silence. Thank you. I'd like to entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
Mr. Mayor, I move that we approve the agenda as presented.
There's a motion on the floor by Dr. Casey. Second, please.
Second.
Second by Mr. Olivari. Roll call, please.
Councilor Casey.
Yes.
Councilor Montoya.
Yes.
Councilor Olivari.
Yes.
I have a motion by Councilor Casey, a second by Councilor Olivari. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Motion carries.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, next on the agenda is public input. I do have one for public input. Mr. Bob Wesley speaking on business item number 3, the task for SMA contractor and others.
Thank you.
Mr. Wesley.
Welcome, sir.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, councilors, my name is Bob Wesley, and I was chair of the city's Utility Advisory Committee back during the major engineering improvements to the city's water system. I want to bring an urgent concern to your attention, that of protecting the city's water supply. The protection is important for the city's image, its thriving businesses, and as well as the water-using community. As you know, the heel of the Hermit's Peak wildfire dipped into the Beaver Creek watershed. That Beaver Creek is a tributary to the Guyanas River, which is the city's main water supply. As soon as we get the inevitable rainstorm hitting that heel, there's a real likelihood of the river being degraded badly. And so well before that happens, it's important to get out in front and mitigate the degradation. I urge the council to provide the utilities department with as much financial and personnel resource as is needed to create the necessary assurance. While the utility department staff and contractors are the ones who can and should design and then perform the urgency needed work, I'd like to identify what I believe is an absolute minimum that should be done. We can't afford to overwhelm the freshwater storage and treatment systems or to pollute Story Lake. The utility department needs to do enough on-the-ground testing, making sure everything works, gates, valves, etc., and any required remediation to give you, the council, assurance, 2 assurances. Number A, that the city's infrastructure is working well enough so that on very short notice, it can divert the entire, possibly large, dirty river water flow away from both Story Lake and the city's freshwater storage and treatment systems. And second, that during the possibly protracted diversion period, the city's infrastructure is working well enough to meet the city's freshwater demand using only stored reservoir water, the protected Story Lake water, and groundwater. I believe the need is critical that the council provide plenty of resources so as to get those assurances. Thank you for your time, and I sure wouldn't want us to be top of the Channel 13 news for water problems. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much for your time. Appreciate that.
Mr. Mayor, that concludes public input.
Thank you.
Our next item on the agenda is mayor's appointments, reports, and recognitions, proclamations. Our first is approval to appoint Robert Witters to the Finance Advisory Committee.
What's the pleasure of the council?
Mr. Mayor, is this your recommendation?
It's not mine.
It's not yours?
Nope.
Mr. Mayor, I move that we approve the appointment of Robert Witters to the Finance Advisory Committee. Mr. Witters has a lot of experience in finances, and I think that he would be a very positive asset to that committee and a big help to the members who are there. And I support this fully.
Thank you. There's a motion on the floor by Ms. Casey. Second, please.
Mr. Mayor, question.
Mr. Montoya.
I thought our charter required the mayor's recommendation for any member on committees to mayor and council.
Mr. Attorney.
My understanding is every board, commission, or committee the mayor recommends to council, with council approval.
I think the magic word is advisory.
Says the mayor shall appoint all members of boards and commissions subject to approval by the council.
Thank you.
But not advisory groups,
Does
right?
it specify advisory or non-advisory?
Except as otherwise provided in this charter. So my understanding is the only, it doesn't have an exception for the advisory committees, and I don't see any other exception for the permanent boards and commissions. So it looks like that's just the process. The mayor appoints and the city council approves.
If that's the case, if you want to table this, it's up to the council, but I'd recommend to table until I get a chance to nominate.
I will remove my motion
Okay,
and until
next week?
we determine what we're going to do.
Okay, so that'll be the first meeting in May that we'll table this item.
Is there a motion to table?
I move that we table until the first meeting in May.
Second, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Roll call, please. Second by Mr. Montoya.
Councilor Ulibarri?
Yes.
Councilor Montoya?
Yes.
Councilor Casey?
Yes.
I have a motion by Councilor Casey, a second by Councilor Montoya. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Motion carries.
Thank you.
Moving on to the proclamations. The first proclamation is for Earth Day, and if I may read it into the record.
Absolutely. Thank you,
Mr. Mayor.
Cassandra.
Whereas Earth Day is an annual event that helps raise awareness about environmental issues while providing tips for protecting resources in our community. And whereas a sustainable environment can be achieved through educational efforts, public policy, meaningful employment, and community advocacy. And whereas any measure of a successful society, low mortality rates, economic growth and diversity, productivity, and public safety are in some way related to our earth and a sustainable environment. And whereas we are all stewards of the earth and environment upon which future generations depend. And whereas through its combined efforts and beautification program, the City of Las Vegas is protecting our resources and improving the look of our community to enhance the quality of life for every resident and enable its businesses to grow and prosper. And whereas on April 22nd, 2022, the City of Las Vegas Utility Department Solid Waste Division will be leading an Earth Day litter cleanup in the community. And whereas each citizen of our city is called upon to help protect our community, environment, and planet from pollution, to practice disposing of waste properly, and to get involved in local beautification events. And now therefore I, Louis A. Trujillo, Mayor of the City of Las Vegas, along with the members of the governing body, hereby proclaim April 22nd, 2022 as Earth Day.
Thank you, Cassandra.
Certainly, Mr. Mayor. Our next proclamation is for Crime Victims' Rights Week. National Crime Victims' Rights Week is April 24th through the 30th, 2022. Whereas the term victim is more than just a label and has legal standing and protections that go along with it, and whereas Crime Victims' Rights Act passed here in New Mexico and at the federal level guarantee victims a right to meaningfully participate in the criminal justice process, and whereas victim service providers, advocates, law enforcement officers, attorneys, and other allied professionals can help survivors find their justice by enforcing these rights, and whereas victim service providers and allied professionals can reach more victims through innovative trauma-informed programs such as telehealth services and multidisciplinary teams, and whereas victim service providers and allied professionals can increase access to victim services and compensation in areas that have been historically undeserved, marginalized, and adversely affected by inequality by implementing culturally responsive services, and whereas equity and inclusion are fundamental prerequisites to survivor care and survivor-led services that provide victims with opportunities to share their experiences are essential blueprints for support, and whereas Crime Victims' Rights Week provides an opportunity to recommit to ensuring that accessible, appropriate, and trauma-informed services are offered to all victims of crime, and whereas the City of Las Vegas is hereby dedicated to helping crime survivors find their justice by enforcing victims' rights, expanding access to services, and ensuring equity and inclusion for all, and now therefore I, Louis A. Trujillo, Mayor of the City of Las Vegas, along with members of the governing body, hereby proclaim the week of April 24th through the 30th, 2022 as Crime Victims' Rights Week, reaffirming this city's commitment to creating a victim service and criminal justice response that assists all victims of crime during Crime Victims' Rights Week and throughout the year, and expressing our sincere gratitude and appreciation for those community members, victim service providers, and criminal justice professionals who are committed to improving our response to all victims of crime so that they may find relevant assistance, support, justice, and peace.
Thank you, Cassandra.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I do have one more that wasn't on the agenda.
You only get two for the night, I'm sorry.
This one is our Drinking Water Week. Whereas water is our most valuable natural resource, and whereas drinking water serves a vital role in daily life, serving an essential purpose to health, hydration, and hygiene needs for the quality of life our citizens enjoy, and whereas tap water delivers public health protection, fire protection, support for our economy, and the quality of life we enjoy, and whereas the hard work performed by the entire water sector designing capital projects, operators ensuring the safety and quality of drinking water, or a member of a pipe crew maintaining the infrastructure communities rely on to transport high-quality drinking water from its source to consumers' taps, and whereas the coronavirus pandemic has shone a light on the importance of drinking water for health, hydration, and hygiene needs, and whereas we are all stewards of the water infrastructure upon which current and future generations depend, and whereas the citizens of our city are called upon to help protect our source waters from pollution, practice water conservation, and get involved with their water by familiarizing themselves with it, and now therefore I, Louis A. Trujillo, Mayor of the City of Las Vegas, along with members of the governing body, hereby proclaim May 1st through the 7th, 2022 as Drinking Water Week. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Thank you, Cassandra.
You're welcome, Mr. Mayor.
So at this time, instead of a report from me, I'd like to call on Maria Gilvery for a report regarding the water systems and the fire issues related to that.
Mayor, councilors,
thank
Mr.
you.
Manager? Yes, sir. So first thing I'd like to update everybody on is the fire in, the Hermit's Peak fire is 81% contained. The current conditions with our water related to the fire, we still have 11 inches of snowpack with 4.7 inches of snow water equivalent. So we do still have some water up in the mountains that we'll be getting in our runoff. Our river flow is currently 15 CFS, cubic feet per second, and per our water master, per our rotation agreement, actually the water master allowed the city to come on today, even though normally we would be off rotation. The water master contacted us, the acequias were not needing any water, and so they went ahead and called and asked if the city could take it. So we're taking currently 3 CFS, which is equivalent to about a day and a half of the water that we need for our community. We are currently at about 280 million gallons of water in storage. We are doing great with storage. We are about 70 million gallons more in storage at this point this year than we were same point last year. As people know, the forestry, the guys working on putting out the fire have been in need of some water, so we've made Bradner Reservoir available to them, which is a reservoir that currently is not online. We did the rehabilitation work, and there's a process with the Dam Safety Bureau to have it meet certain stages before it gets permitted officially. That doesn't mean we can't use it in case of emergency, but technically it is not permitted, and so we're not currently using it. So we did allow the helos to dip into Bradner. Bradner has 100 million gallons in Bradner right now, and the helicopters have taken 161,000 gallons over the last 10 days. That is 1/20th of 1% of all of our water currently in storage. So it's less than 1%.
How many days is that equal to, do you know?
For the community, that would be 1/10 of a day.
1/10 of a day?
It's not even a day's amount of water.
Okay.
So we are making, again, that water available to assist with putting the fire out. We are actually required to assist when it comes to water. It's critical that these fires do get put out, and per state, and I'm looking exactly for the regulations so I can quote it, but I was informed that the state engineer does require that communities make water available to firefighters in case of need. So I do also have a couple of maps that I can make available to the council, so I was not able to get it printed out in time for more than one copy. But the larger surface area there is the Hermit's Peak. And if you notice, there's 2 little dots down here. We do have another fire in Calf Canyon. That last numbers that I had was 2 small areas, one relatively small areas. One was 90 acres and the other was approximately 40 acres. That was as of this morning, so I'm working on getting an update, and I will make these available to the council. So I have the overall picture, and this gray area is the Guyanus watershed. So the hashed marked area would be the portion of the wildfire that is currently in our watershed. So it is less than 40% of the entire fire area is in our watershed. As for, so that's the fire update and water use. As for post-fire prep, and I appreciate Mr. Wesley's points, we have been working for years on our emergency response plan to be prepared for a wildfire. We knew this was inevitable. So we have been working with other communities on best management practices, working with the Environment Department. Our hydrologist is also on board working with, communicating with NRCS for us. They are on the NRCS committee. So they're working with...
NRCS.
I will have to get back with you on what actually it stands for. Unless, Leo, do you remember off the top of your head?
Not for me.
So they are a national resources, I believe, entity that will help the city move forward with the post-fire responses. In addition, since a portion of this is in, I believe, federal forestry area, that we will get a lot of assistance in mitigation prior to any of this impacting our river and therefore our water source. So our goal would be to continue to try and mitigate and keep it out of our river. If it does end up in the river, if we do end up with heavy rains, all of our reservoirs, city reservoirs, Bradner and Peterson, can be isolated within 30 minutes, and that's the time for my staff to get to the point of being able to isolate it. So within 30 minutes, I can isolate all of our reservoirs. Even less if people are physically at the plant or physically up in the diversion. We're currently communicating with Story Project Water Users Association to work on a plan with them as well. That is a private reservoir, and so we're working with them to see how we can support each other in making sure that Story has what they need. They are in desperate need of water in their reservoir. At the same point, we want to make sure that the city's water is protected. So we're currently meeting and talking with Story Project Water Users Association. In addition to NRCS, we're going to reach out to Tierra Montes and working with forestry on our post-fire response. Unfortunately, there are a lot of communities that have experience in this, so fortunately for us, that allows us to work with their best management practices on minimizing impacts to the community. But if it does enter the river, our first response is going to be if it reaches a point where we can't treat it, which we're looking at pH, alkalinity, and the volume of ash in the water. If we can't treat it, then we let it go. We will treat it as long as we can, and we will not let it enter our reservoirs, and we will not let it enter the treatment plant if it is something we cannot treat. The diversion is, we actually isolate the diversion every 3 days. So those valves and equipment is operated every 3 days. So that's what I have for an update, if anybody has any questions.
Do you anticipate any additional expenses post-fire that your department might need to, with like reclamation or anything that we could do to keep that ash out of the, I know we pray for rain, but we know that when it rains, that burn scar on the Beaver Creek side is going to wash into the river. But is there any expenses that you might anticipate?
I expect there will be expenses, but I also expect that we're going to get a lot of support.
And they did do a state of emergency, the county, with the state?
Yes, sir.
So we may be eligible for some funding
Yes.
to assist with the
Yes.
fire?
So what we'll be doing is we'll be reaching out to have solutions, and then we'll be able to put a dollar amount to those solutions and start moving forward. In addition, forward thinking, which we were already doing this, we've thinned around our reservoirs a few times, and forestry about 3 to 4 weeks ago had already contacted me about additional thinning around our reservoirs, which is no cost to the city. We sign an agreement and we accept that they're coming on our property, the city property, to thin, and forestry sets all that up. So we were actually already in the process of doing some additional thinning. It would be on city property around our reservoirs, and we'll continue to do that as we've been doing it in the past. I know that's been brought up. Has the city taken initiative for thinning? We can control the thinning on city property, and we have been thinning on city property.
Good. Council?
Mr. Mayor, I do have a question. Just for a point of clarification, rumors start just as fast as fire sometimes, but we do not have half of our watershed in
Correct.
burnt or that has been on fire. We
Yes.
have had a small portion of it on the right-hand side in Port Linit.
Correct. So all of this gray area this isn't even our whole watershed, is a huge portion of our watershed. And this portion here is the only portion of our watershed that's impacted. So I couldn't even give you a percentage now, but it would be probably less than 5% of the entire watershed is currently impacted by this fire.
And with that note, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to also, I've attended a few of the meetings that you have as well with the Forest Service and the state and the federal. But I'll tell you that these people came into Las Vegas and it seemed like they took over Camp Luna, and I thank Camp Luna for lending them the building. But I'll tell you that these people all were organized, friendly. Any questions that anyone had, they would answer, or they'll get an answer for you. I was amazed how all these different organizations, different groups came together. You know, and one of those is of course the county, and the county sheriff had a big role in all that. Our city manager had a big role in acquiring, you know, letting them know what we have available for them to utilize. But it's so amazing to me that it was a whole new community that was up at Luna and is still there working for our safety and for protection of our land and our structures and so forth. I think they did an awesome job, amazing job, with the conditions that they were faced with. So I thank them and everyone that's involved with that fire. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Just for the note as well, I know people have been calling me and maybe been inquiring. The State Forest Service is going into fire restrictions early this year. They usually do it in June. They're doing it as of next week. So there's no open flames, no smoking, all those things. We were hoping that they would shut down the forest, but they do things incrementally, and for now, there's some very strict restrictions going in starting next week. So those will be announced by the Forest Service. So, Maria, thank you so much for everything. I know you've been at the meetings too, and it's a huge concern for the community, and I appreciate you stepping forward and helping with that as well.
If I might, Mayor, I know a few people have asked how do they get updates. There are updates on Facebook, on the Forestry's website. County has updates. NCWeb also has regular updates. And if anybody wants to reach out to my office, I will point them in the direction of being able to continually be updated on this. We did put out a PSA, and maybe I'll make sure that PSA goes out again. That gives all the phone numbers for people to call in case they need assistance, Red Cross, or evacuation questions. We're not out of this, and so we need to stay prepared.
Vigilant, yep.
Yes.
But thank you so much. I've just found out too, because I don't have Facebook, and I was concerned when they gave me a Facebook address, but it's my understanding you don't need to have Facebook in order to read the updates.
Correct. It is also on the State Forestry website.
Yep.
So.
Thank you. Mr. City Manager, do you have anything to add to this report?
No, I'd just like to give you some updated numbers for like the CAF fire. There's 75 personnel as of 2 hours ago, and it had burned 150 acres. Obviously with our winds, that number is going to continue to grow. NRCS is a branch off of the USDA Natural Conservation Department. Also, there were some road closures and evacuations in the Guyanas Canyon, which is County Road A3 and A3A. There is a roadblock at the bottom of the hill by the ice skating pond.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you, Maria. I appreciate your report tonight. Next order of business, please.
Mr. Mayor, we have our councilors' reports.
Thank you, councilors.
I have
Go
a
ahead.
lot. I have a lot.
Go ahead.
I have some questions for the street department. I got some phone calls from constituents that were concerned about work that's being done at in Creston. And that's not Ward 3, but I take phone calls from whoever is concerned, and I don't ask them where they live or anything like that. But apparently there were some sewer lines that were broken while work was being done up there. I don't know what kind of work was being done, but they were concerned that maybe the city employees who were working up there didn't know where the water lines were, where the gas lines are, the sewer lines. And so my question is our safety, I don't even know who our safety officer is at this point in time.
Adrian
Jaramillo.
Okay. Well, does he go out there and check on things, or Is any of that information provided to the employees that are going out there?
Yes, ma'am. Anytime we do any type of digging, we obviously do 811, which is a digging protocol for any type, we do any type of excavation, but we have not done any type of work up there, and so I don't know what that's pertaining to. We are doing some renovations and equipment installs at the park in Crestone Circle, but that's a contractor that is responsible for attaining those
And who is the
digs.
contractor?
Off the top of my head, it's a playground installer from Albuquerque. I can't tell you off the top of my head.
Okay, just email me when you
Yes, ma'am.
get a chance. Okay, the other question I have is Garfield Street is being worked on, and what I'm asking is, there was a lot of controversy regarding that particular street because it had been vacated years and years and years ago, and that was no longer city property. I would like to ask Mr. Aaron if the legal paperwork or what has been done to reclaim that street so that the city can legally be working on it.
For which street?
Garfield.
Garfield was never deeded outside of the city's ownership. City maintained the deed on it, never issued a deed to anyone else. So we maintained it, and it was in dispute in terms of whether the city was going to give it to the individuals that lived on either side of it, but the city never deeded it to anybody. It's always been city property.
Okay.
It was a huge liability in the disrepair that it was in, Counselor.
It is in really bad shape, but I was concerned because when I was on the council before, this was a huge issue that lasted forever, and persons that lived on one side of the street said that they had paid taxes and they had paid all kinds of stuff, and that part of the street belonged to them. The other people that lived on the other side of the street had not done anything, and so they didn't own anything. And so there was a lot of controversy, and as a result, at that particular time, because of the many changes that we had in the legal personnel here at the city, it kind of fell through the cracks. And so I'm happy to hear that. Thank you, Mr. Aaron. Okay, and then my next question is, are city employees allowed to take city vehicles home? And if they are, who is allowed, and is there a mileage limit that they can go out of?
Yes, ma'am, there is a mileage limit. That's per administrative regulation. Obviously, we have departments that are on call, and that is on a rotation schedule, and those individuals are able to take it per the mileage ordinance.
Okay, because I was told just today that at least one police vehicle is being taken out towards Villanueva, I guess. So what's the mileage limit?
So there's two different limits. There's a limit for main city vehicles, and there's a limit that was implemented during the negotiation with the police union.
Okay.
I think it's 65?
65 or 75, I'm not sure, but I can get that number for you.
Okay, so technically if somebody lives in Santa Fe and they work here, they can take the police car home and back.
We negotiated a higher mileage for our police department to entice some certified individuals to work in our department. Yes, ma'am.
Okay,
And that discretion is left up to the chief to decide who takes the car home.
yeah, okay. And Mr. City Manager, are there any new hires? We had a listing of new hires last month, but I didn't see one for this month.
Yes, ma'am. I usually give that update on on the
Just
first meeting. Yes, ma'am.
Okay,
But we have had new hires since last week. Yes, ma'am.
okay. And I hate to ask this again, but what is the status of the RFP for the animal shelter? I received an email from a person that does not belong to the AWC, but is very concerned about the issue, and wanted to know what the status was. I said I didn't have any more than what I had already told her before. And this person mentioned that she had been told that there was no problem because we have until the end of June, but we really don't.
Right.
You know, if we don't get that RFP out soon, we're going to miss the June 30th deadline, and we'll end up with no services for animal welfare services. So can you give me an update on that, please?
Yeah, actually, Leo and I have both been working on that all this week, and we have a goal set to get it out this Friday. One of the issues that we had with the previous contract, going back many years, like some of the other contracts that we've run across, is that the city just let whoever the contractor was use the property for free. We can't do that under the anti-donation clause. So there was a number of issues with the former contracts that we had to go through, we had to make corrections to. So we haven't finished a contract. Right now we're focusing our efforts on the RFP, and so that's what we're doing. Our goal is to try to get it out on Friday. We are under the same understanding as you that we've got a time crunch in this, and we need to move quickly. We've been trying to move quickly, but we've just had to fix so many things with the way it was done previously that we didn't want to just preemptively put something out that hadn't really been combed through well.
And I think both sides need, both sides made mistakes, let me put it that way. And so if and when that RFP comes out, I hope it's something that is amenable to potential bidders and proposals will actually come in. I don't believe that the way it is now, that will ever happen. But if you're working on it and you're trying to address those particular issues in the RFP, I think maybe we may be able to work with whoever, you know, puts in a reasonable bid, and we can work with them and come up with a scope of work and a contract that will provide services to the community, will provide for the safety of animals that are brought in, and that issues that have come up in the past are taken care of. Okay. My other question is, in the past, when I was here before, we had requested, I say we, the council had requested a listing, a monthly listing of every check that is written. And the listing gave the budget number from where it came, and who the check was made to, how much the check was for, and what was the purpose of the check. So for example, if somebody had a contract to provide services for dancing lessons at the senior center, that person's name would come up on the check, and it would say so-and-so for, you know, Louis Trujillo for teaching samba to, you know, senior citizens or whatever, and how much they're paid per month, okay? I would like to request that we get that again. And the reason I say that is sometimes when it comes to putting out RFPs and reviewing companies that have done work with the city before, sometimes it happens that those dollar amounts that are quoted in a contract are forgotten, and because you pay everything on a monthly basis, it doesn't seem like too much. And so when you get a listing of those checks, and they're the same amount every month for whatever services are being provided by that contractor or whoever is doing the services for the city, a lot of times they amount way over the amount that is specified on the contract. And so I would like to request that we have that check listing so that we can look it over, and if we see something that's, you know, maybe hasn't been noticed or that we have questions on, we can go ahead and ask and say, why is this company getting this amount of money when it's only supposed, when their contract says it's supposed to be this amount? So I would appreciate that if that could be done for us. The last thing, that, aren't you happy I finally got to the last?
You only get 3, Pepper. I'm just kidding.
Forget it. It's not going to happen. The last item is I got 2 reports, a phone call and a text from constituents who live on 4th Street by Carnegie Library. And apparently there has been a, they called it a giant semi parked on the 800 block of 4th Street. It has been there for over 2 months. It has not been moved. Apparently the neighbors of the semi have asked the people whose houses it's parked in front of, why is it there and what's in it and can you move it? And they said, no, our house is going to be a halfway house. And the semi is full of furniture for the halfway house. So I would like to know if there is a halfway house coming up that we don't know about. And I would like to know because these people tell me that they have reported twice about the semi kind of blocking traffic and the view of traffic that's oncoming. And also a Mercedes that has been parked across from Carnegie on 5th Street. And that has not been moved either, and it's taking up parking spaces, I guess, for residential. And so I didn't have time to drive over there to look, but they said that they had already complained twice and nothing has been done. So I believe, and I tried to check the ordinances, but the way they're arranged and worded in the website is not exactly helpful. And so the ordinances for parked vehicles that have not been moved are not even written out. And so it just says parking, big deal. So I would like to know why they have not been addressed and what can be done. And if there is a halfway house that's going up, somebody needs to get out there and find out what's going on, because if they don't have a permit, they haven't bought a business license, all of those types of things have to be looked at.
Did they tell you who they reported it to?
They said that they
Barbara?
reported it on the city website.
Oh, it might be
Has
through
has an app.
the app.
for- Yeah. And that they were very disappointed because they did it that way because they thought that way it would be, action would be taken on it quickly,
Mhm.
but it didn't turn out that way.
Okay. So, first of all, I'd like to just give direction to the city manager to make sure that anybody who has access to that app, that they respond within 24 hours. That's our policy. Every complaint or suggestion or comments that come over that on the 311 app needs to be responded to within 24 hours. So the directors need to be on that every single day if they're reporting potholes or anything like that, ordinance variances or so forth. So we need to revive that and make sure that that's happening. To my knowledge, there hasn't been an application for a halfway house. And we could send the chief to, or the police officers over to look at the parking situation.
So we're actually currently looking into that trailer, that semi-trailer, and that vehicle that's parked. More than likely, that vehicle will get red tagged. As for the trailer, we got a little bit of an update today. We spoke, the code enforcement was actually out there today, and they're speaking with the neighbors and possibly the owner to see if they can get it removed. Being that there's no application for any business or any halfway house, more than likely it's going to be removed.
Okay,
Thank you.
I appreciate that. Mr. Mayor, if you'll indulge me just one last thing.
Of course.
Someone just came in that I know has an interest in the animal welfare RFP. So, Mr. Aaron, could you please just repeat what you said earlier briefly so that they know?
Sure, the city manager and I, over the course of the last few weeks, have gone and sought out animal control shelter RFPs from other municipalities that are similar to ours in size. We obviously didn't want to pull them from big cities, but what we try to do is find examples that are already out there that would be narrowly tailored to what would work in a small municipality like ours, and we've been working on that over the course of the last few weeks. We've sought some other input, and our goal is to have that scope of work and that RFP finished by Friday.
Thank you very much. That's all, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
Believe it or not.
It's perfectly fine. Who's next?
The next
Mr. Ulibarri, go ahead.
is, Chief, on the code enforcement, on the west side, resident just called me today about two vehicles that have been abandoned. They've been dismantled right on Salazar and Socorro. And then there's 2 more vehicles on the West National that haven't been moved for months. They're on the city right away. And I could go down the line. There's more on the west side, maybe around town, but I think our code enforcement guys aren't really putting too much attention on that. You could see them, you can drive through the streets, and they're dismantled. You know, people are tearing them up and here and there right on the city right away. So I would like for the code enforcement to check on that for us. I'll give our city manager a list. And then our parks, our Peace Park and Rodriguez, our fields are really dried up. I don't know if Maria could tell us if they're watering our fields, or they look real bad. They haven't paid too much attention to them. So
I believe they've been watered. I've seen water, I've seen the sprinklers running. There is effluent available. It's been available since April 4th. And I've seen water on sidewalks in the morning, so I know that they've been watering. Whatever parks the infrastructure is complete on, I believe there might be some infrastructure issues with some of the parks. But the water is available to use.
thank you. That's all, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Mr. Montoya?
I would just like to inform Mayor and Council that our staff has scheduled May the 13th on a Friday for our organizational meeting according to our city charter. And also, I'd like to report to the citizens, and this is something that when I came into this administration, people were wanting their streets fixed, potholes fixed. And I'd like to just mention that part of Mountain View Drive from Grand to Moreland has been done. Romero Street is being worked on. King Street has been worked on. Salazar Street has been worked on. Lincoln and Row Road is being worked on. Garfield Street is being worked on. In the near future, we're going to have Legion from Grand Avenue all the way to 7th Street done. That's like a $2.8 million project. University Avenue, we're approving that tonight for $2.8 million. From Grand Avenue to 8th Street, and from 8th Street up to National Street. And then we have other city streets on the map. We have another listing of 10 or 12 streets that we're going to be working at to finding funding for them. So we are working as diligently as possible in our streets. Now, the price of oil is really high, and we're getting less for a buck, really. So we're just having to do with what we have. We are, I thank the staff also, Mayor and Council. We are working with 4 different parks in our city, and we're going to be bringing canopies to them and new playground equipment. We're also working today. Leo had a couple of meetings on the Lincoln Park gazebo, and that's going to be working. We're going to be working on that too. There's a plan for that. 2 years ago I said be patient with us, and you have been patient with us, and we are moving forward. It's hard with a pandemic, and it's hard obtaining people to come and work for the city of Las Vegas, and probably for anybody. The NMBHI has what, 200 vacant positions?
307.
307. And so everybody's hurting. I think that we're getting our money's worth out of our city manager. We're beating him to death with all these projects, but they're getting done, and our directors, the same thing. But I really thank staff for sticking with us, and our directors and our managers, and just a little bit of an update as to what the city's doing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Next order of business, please.
Mr. Mayor, we have our police chief's report. We have Police Chief Antonio Salazar.
Welcome, Mr. Salazar.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. So while we're waiting to get this started, we were talking about the fire earlier, the different checkpoints that are out in the county. We're actually assisting the county by the skating pond for the checkpoint. So we've reached out to them, we let them know, and the sheriff and I have been in pretty good communication on anything that they need from us that we'll take care of if we can. So here, our Field Operations Division slash Patrol, 59 arrests were made, 5 burglary reports were generated. We had 12 calls for service for burglary. Parking citations, we had 51, 28 non-traffic citations, and 166 traffic citations were issued. We also had 1,369 calls for service. We are looking for the next council meeting to get the court fees that are generated from our citations to create a line item in the PD's budget so we can obtain those funds and utilize them as we need. And we currently have, I have the numbers, $8,881 and I think 63 cents in that budget currently. For the operations that were done for March, we had Operation Spring Cleaning, which was a traffic operation, and DWI Saturation Patrol, specifically targeting DWIs. STEP also, that included DWIs, that included numerous traffic offenses, cell phone usage, driver's inattention, anything like that. More traffic patrol on the streets. We had Operation Sticky Fingers, which was conducted at Walmart, and out of that we had 8 municipal shoplifting citations. We made 1 arrest, and we arrested 1 for shoplifting, and we had 2 runouts which we were able to apprehend. With this, we did it on a Saturday, also on a Sunday, which, speaking to Walmart personnel, Sunday was actually their busiest day that they have during the week. And when we did this on Saturday, Sunday was, I think we issued out the 1 municipal citation, so that deterred quite a bit of people from shoplifting from Walmart. We're going to continue doing this with other businesses around town. We just have to stay in communication with the businesses we meet who feel like they need it a little bit more. Code enforcement. So as we all know, they're temporarily transferred to the police department as of March 14th. So while they were there, they closed down, cease and desist, stop working order was issued on a building permit for the lack of a building permit. 9 red tags were issued. Those, Councilman Ulibarri, that goes back to what you were talking about for the red tags. We will look into the west part of the area, also continue other areas as well, but those vehicles will be red tagged fairly soon. And also that Mercedes that's on by Carnegie Library. 5 abandoned vehicles tags were issued, 2 vehicles were towed, 3 cannabis applications were issued. 3 site inspections for permits, and 1 written warning was issued. For our animal control, and for this, we can either wait for after my report or bring up animal control now if you guys want to ask them any questions during this slide. But I'll finish this one. It's 125 animal control calls, 48 total intakes, 1 citation was issued, 1 verbal, and 5 dead on arrival animal control or animals. So we can bring the animal control personnel up after this. Our records division, 220 offense incident reports, 32 traffic citations were entered, 251 citations were entered, 119 customers were attended to, 486 offensive and traffic citation reports were scanned. We completed 20 IPRAs. We are continuing training and continuing to work on our destruction orders. So this is our street crimes / narcotics and evidence division. And as you see here, the self-initiated is quite high. That is primarily for our investigation in narcotics. That shows how much they are out proactive in the community, specifically for narcotic enforcement.
What does self-initiated mean?
That means they're self-generated. They're not calls for service. They're out there. They see something on themselves, and then they generate a report or a case by themselves without dispatch having to dispatch them out. So our seizures on investigations and patrols and agents, 0 grams of methamphetamine, 0 grams of cocaine, and let's see, let me get to the more important ones here. 8 grams of fentanyl were seized, and evidence, 268 evidence were turned in, items of evidence. That's primarily out of our search warrants for vehicles and houses. And another important one to look at is the 7 firearms off the streets, illegal firearms off the streets, potentially used in a crime or on a person illegally. We had district court. We also attended magistrate court, safe house interviews, MDT meetings, and narcotics training in Albuquerque. So we're taking the initiative. Our officers are not, including our agent, is taking the initiative to attend trainings and further his education on narcotics. I know, Councilor Casey, you had mentioned hiring. We actually, let me see, well, that's the next slide, but just to answer that question, we hired a communications manager, Catalicio Barr.
I saw that.
Yes. So as far as the trainings go, as we can see here, we currently have officers who are in the police academy, and so we have 3 in there, and they're due to graduate in May. There we go. All of our officers are certified in the intoxilizer. We haven't had that in a little while, I think in the past year. So we will be conducting and I'll let everybody know here, a roadblock on Cinco de Mayo weekend. We're getting that squared away as we speak.
Can I go back on training, Chief?
Yes.
Just to add, so the public will know that I procured a training for all, mandatory training for all police officers regarding mental illness and responding to calls that are pertaining to someone with a mental illness background or somebody in a mental illness breakdown, and how the police are going to respond, the rights of the people with mental illness, and it's also going to cover de-escalation and a lot of training. It's going to be sponsored by Disability Rights New Mexico, So 2 of their attorneys will provide that training on May 19th, and we are opening it up to the Sheriff's Department and the state police, but this will be a yearly training for the police officers in Las Vegas, and I will sponsor that every year. And hopefully the person who's here after me will continue it. But I think it's very important for our community, and it's the utmost importance that our police officers know how to handle a mental health crisis.
Yes, and for that, Mayor, we thank you, and all of the police personnel will be attending that as well.
Thank you.
Great, that's wonderful.
I know, it's so good.
So here, back on the hiring and promotions, we issued a personnel order for letters of interest for qualified officers for the sergeant's position. 1 communication specialist, which is our dispatcher, completed the NMDPS Telecommunications Academy on March 11th.
They'll be at the training as well.
Yes.
Thanks.
Yes. Some of the events that we've done, we did an escort for former firefighter Frank Lovato from Albuquerque to Las Vegas. We also hosted, well, Pino's hosted the Coffee with the Cop at the restaurant. And we're looking to do another one at the end of May, probably outside this time to get out, now that it's getting warmer and hopefully not so windy. And we also attended services for the officer who died in that crash as well. Here are the vacancies for the police department. We currently have 18 vacancies, and, well, 17 at this point, because the communications manager is filled.
And animal control officers?
Yes, so we have one who is actually from CSA. He's here now. Chris Lujan, he applied to be an animal control officer.
Wonderful.
That's going through the process. And Justin Marquez is actually certified. He's actually doing both code enforcement and animal control because of his expertise in both of them. So it's actually working out really well for us. Here's our art competition. I think I sent it to all the councilors and mayor for this to include our schools. And I guess this is a good time to ask, the winner of this could possibly be voted on by mayor and council. If that's something that you guys can think about and get back with me before the deadline, that would be great. And I'll stay in communication with you guys in regard to that.
Thank you.
And also we have the Battle of the Badges this month, actually next week on Friday. So we hope that you all can attend, and all the community can attend this game and watch us play and hopefully win against the fire department. Well, yes, we'll. And then I know you guys were wanting to know about our speed trailers. We are actually working on a PO for a speed trailer. We're actually working on it today, and we're going with All Traffic Solutions. The reason why it took so long, the other departments that we were reaching out to, initially we didn't have that much information, and so the specs that we were requesting weren't the specs that we needed to facilitate our needs for the actual license plate reader. We learned that whenever we started reaching out to the other agencies who have done years of research on these things, and now we have everything in line. We have everything ready to go pretty much. That's why we're working on the PO for.
When will they be here? When will they arrive and put into?
This one, they won't be here by May, but it will be here for the other grant that the city gets, which is 100 days and 100 nights, and that's in the month of June. So we'll have that for that grant period of time, and that's a pretty big.
You are still kicking off the speeding
Yes, we're still going
enforcement in
slow
May,
to roll.
right?
We're still going with slow your roll. We're still doing that for the month of May. High traffic areas are being targeted, and we're doing a lot of traffic enforcement. And again, that goes to our roadblock that we're conducting on Cinco de Mayo weekend. So that'll be part of slow your roll.
Thank you.
And sorry, like I mentioned before, if you guys have any questions, there's our animal control officers are here. If you guys want to have them come up and ask them any questions or any concerns, and also if you have any questions for me.
Chief, out of the 1369 incoming calls of service, how many would you say are for the Samaritan House or Lincoln Park area?
At least 4 to 5 a day.
4 to 5 a day?
Yes.
Okay. And then on your 125 animal control calls, that's a big high number for one citation. So what are those calls mostly for?
So if you guys want to come up here and explain that, I can answer a little bit on that. Those are mostly those could be dogs at large, dogs running throughout the city where people see them, and these gentlemen here go out and try to find them.
Welcome, gentlemen. Thank you for being here. So, is there any questions that you can answer, Mr. Montoya, regarding, we have 125 calls and we only issued one citation. How do you respond to that?
So, as far as that, 95% of the time we're not going to see what the community sees. When we have dogs running at large or vicious animals, by the time we get there,
They're chained up or whatever?
yeah, they're friendly, they have water, they're in the yard. So, calls for service, every call that we get, we have to go to. Doesn't necessarily mean that there's a violation being committed. We've stepped in into this role about maybe a month and a half ago. So another reason why why that number is so low is because we're kind of educating the community. A lot of people want to blame the city or animal control or animal shelter, but at the end of the day, it's all of us. It's a community issue. It's an educational issue, and that's what we're trying to do. Is we're educating the community. Unfortunately, we had 124 I didn't knows and one I don't care. So that's pretty much where it's at.
And those five dead animals, were they because of brutality to the animal, or are they just old, or they just died, or what was it?
Run over?
Like an overdose, or what was?
Run over.
Run over.
So the 5 DOAs, I'm pretty sure there was actually more dead on arrivals than what shows. Some of them weren't recorded. Like I said, I was doing this since I was at community development. So most of them were, on the road, ran over, on the easement, found in trash bags, stuff like that. This is why, like, I educate the community, like, this is the reason why we have a running that large ordinance. Anti-tethering ordinance, tethering. These dogs live on these tethers for years. They get off the tether, and they're wild. They don't know how to be around. They don't know how to be social. And then these other dogs running at large, animals running at large. A lot of people will come up and tell me and Officer Johanna, oh, well, they're good dogs. Well, they might be good dogs, but we try and avoid those numbers. Those dead on arrivals, because late at night people are coming home. A lot of people commute from Santa Fe or Springer or wherever the case may be, Santa Rosa. They don't see these dogs, and that's the majority of the time that we get DOAs after hours and on the busy streets. Like I tell people, you might not like what we have to say, or you might not want to agree with the ordinance, but these are the types of things that we try and prevent, and we educate them on that. All it takes is that split seconds. Even if you let your dog out for 10 seconds, all it takes is 1 second for that dog to go down and get run over.
Besides more help, what else can we do to educate the the community about taking care of their dogs and the responsibility that goes behind it.
I mean, you know, us, you know, I remember the last time we were in animal control, you know, we passed out flyers, we got on the radio, I think we had an ad in the op-ed. Honestly, unfortunately, at this time, like, we've tried everything, we've gone down the list of how we can inform the community. At this point, I think, in my opinion, because I've been out there doing it, Officer Lujan's been out there doing it, I think at this time, you know, we're just gonna have to start enforcing a little harder, you know, in order to get their attention and get people to realize, you know, having dogs isn't just a hobby, you know, they're part of the family, you know, you gotta take care of him, you gotta feed him, you gotta take him to the doctor, stuff like that. So it's a responsibility that a lot of people unfortunately aren't aware of, or they don't realize how big of a commitment an animal is, or they just don't care. So that's what it's at.
Thank you very much. That's all the questions I have for you. Chief, I do want to commend your officers for confiscating those 7 firearms. I think that's a very important statistic to have. I wish we would have that every month.
Yes.
That would be really nice, taking the firearms from these people that shouldn't be having them. The last question that I have is that $1,660 seized, does that go through the courts or?
Yes, eventually those go through the courts. So that money is attached to each case that the money is seized from. And then that will be generated through the courts and however they see fit.
Thank you for your report, and I know that I myself, in the last 3 months, have seen more police out on the streets, also on the trikes, through the Guaymas River and on 12th Street and so forth. And just for clarification, for the public, by state statute and by ordinance, you guys aren't required to have a helmet on those trikes.
Correct.
Right?
Correct.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
Dr. Casey?
Thank you. I have a couple of questions. On the citation fees, state law requires that court fees that are collected, part of those go to the state. And so I don't even know if those could be added to your fees.
So, sorry.
Those court fees, you know, whatever they happen to be, part of those have to go to the state. That's required. The other part is used to, for operational purposes at the municipal court. So what other citation fees would you have other than what goes through court?
We amended an ordinance last year that we increased the court costs.
Okay, so it's no longer $29?
No.
Okay.
And so that portion that was raised would go directly to the police department.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. My other question is, there are 15 IPRA requests. Can you tell me what kind of requests are being made? What do people want to know?
A lot of times it's police reports. Actually, most of those are police reports. Traffic accident reports, that's a big majority of those as well. Going into court cases for civils, for traffic offenses, or for traffic crashes. So that's where a lot of our IPRA requests are from.
Okay.
Attorneys.
Thank you. I don't have any other questions, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor
Appreciate
and
that.
Council.
Mr. Mayor, next on the agenda is our finance report. We have our Deputy Finance Director, Dominic Chavez.
Welcome, Dominic. I appreciate you being here.
Good evening, Mayor and Council.
Good evening, sir.
So this evening I have the revenue and expense report for the month ending March 31st, 2022. In our general fund, we're at 81% for the year in revenues, and on our expenditures, we're at 53%. You may have the question as to why 53. Our budget has increased during the quarter. just so you're aware of that part. Our enterprise funds, our revenues coming in at 75%, that's right on track with where we're at for the year. Our expenditures are at 60%. I'm sorry, our general fund surplus, 1,147,518. Our enterprise surplus, 1,488,589. For our recreation department, our revenues are coming in at 406,812, and our expenditures at 293,952 with a surplus of 112,860. Always take into consideration that general fund transfer. Lodger's tax. For this month, we're at 83%, 389,000, and our expenditures are at 55% of 275,000, which is a surplus of 114,143. Everything's looking so good so far. As far as I'm concerned, like I said, the only things that look a little bit odd to me was that 53% for being 3/4 of the way through the year. But like I also mentioned, we did bars within this quarter that increased our budget, so it looks a little bit different there.
Cal, I have a question for you.
Sure.
Is your report approved by the Finance Committee?
Yes, sir.
It is?
Yes, it was reviewed on Monday, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay.
I wasn't
and
part.
Thank you. The second question I have for you, and I'll always ask this to anybody who's sitting in that chair.
Yes, sir.
Is there anything within that budget that you need to report to us, or that you're concerned about? Any red flags?
None that I'm aware of.
Okay. I appreciate that, Dominic.
Mr. Mayor.
Questions? Mr. Matoya?
Mr. Dominic.
Yes,
Yeah, on the 53% that adjustments had to be made, what was the reasoning for that?
Those were budget adjustment increases that we've done throughout the quarter. One of the big ones was the mid-year bar that we did, and that was 2-point-some odd million, so. And of course, we've got senior center that's brought in monies, well, not senior center on this part, but we've done various bars to DFA to increase their budgets in the quarter.
Okay, so, are we going to be seeing any big amount of adjustments in the near future? Before
Not that I'm
July?
aware of. If you look at expenditures last year versus this year, we're actually $813,000 higher at this point. But like I mentioned, that budget kind of just skews everything.
Is that it? Thank you. Anybody else? Thank you, Dominic. I appreciate your time here.
Yes, sir.
And I appreciate you doing your extra duty, too.
No problem.
I really appreciate you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Council.
Next order of business.
Mr. Mayor, moving on to business items. Business item number 1, request approval of resolution 22-17, acceptance and approval of the fiscal year 2021 audit financial report. We have Mr. Chavez, and you have your...
And Ms. Heather Lucero with Portillo Brown and Hill.
Hi, welcome, Ms. Lucero.
Thank you. Good
Yeah.
evening. So we'll do a high-level overview this evening of the 2021 audit reports. If you have any questions throughout the presentation, please feel free to ask. Or of course, if you'd like to wait to the end. Okay, so the first slide that we have up here, you'll see the 4 different colored boxes. That first slide, that kind of lime green colored slide, states that our responsibilities as auditors is to come in and express an opinion on the city's financial statements. So what we do is we come in, we take the city's trial balance, your general ledger, we look at that, and based on that information, we use sampling techniques, we review documentation, and utilizing that, we will express an opinion on the financial statements. And so that's our requirements as auditors that we do. The second slide talks about, and that first slide also mentions that management and the governing council is responsible ultimately for the city's policies, procedures, and for maintaining that general ledger. The second, kind of the red colored square, talks about that we provide reasonable and not absolute assurance. And the reason that we say reasonable and not absolute is because to provide absolute, we would have to look at every single transaction. And there's just no cost benefit to that. So what we do is we use sampling techniques, statistics, things like that. And so we'll apply that across the city's fiscal year, and based on that information, we come up with our opinion. And so that's why we say reasonable. Based on that information, we believe that we've got a good idea of how the numbers are looking. That kind of teal colored square down at the bottom, because we are required by the state of New Mexico to perform what we refer to as a yellow book audit, we are required to look at the city's internal controls. And so in the annual audit report, you will see the opinion, and you will also see an internal control report. We do not express an opinion on internal controls. Rather, we look at the city's internal controls and we see if they're operating effectively, have internal controls been implemented, is there anything that maybe we need to recommend to improve those processes. And then the last box, kind of the little pink one in the corner, talks about us, we're required to communicate any significant items. And so we have required communication that we make with management and required communication, that we also make with the council. And so that's kind of what that last box talks about. The next slide talks about our opinion, and so for FY21, we issued an unmodified, or what's also referred to as a clean opinion. And so this opinion states that the financial statements are presented fairly in respect to generally accepted accounting principles. And that's what the city wants. The city wants a clean or an unmodified. Our next slide, as I mentioned previously, we do issue a report on internal controls. And so that first box talks about the findings that we had with the city's internal controls. And so there were 5 findings this year. That second box, so in FY21, the city received a large amount of federal CARES funding money, and a result of that is a federal single audit. And so part of that federal single audit, we look at, is the city in compliance with those federal requirements? And we had one finding related to that.
Is it fair to ask you to elaborate, or do you want to ask?
So we do have a slide towards the end that will discuss all 6 findings.
Okay.
And so it'll kind of give you the details of each finding, and then we do have the audit report so we can discuss in depth if you'd like. The next slide, this is one of our required communications. So as we're completing the audit and we're working with the city's finance team and we're working with management, we are required to communicate if we encounter any difficulties during the audit. And we are happy to say that during FY21 we did not have any difficulties. We received the information we requested, our questions were answered, supporting documentation was provided. So our next slide talks about significant audit adjustments. We're required to communicate to the council if we would have come in and had to make a lot of audit adjustments, we would be required to communicate that. And what that means is if we had to come in and change a lot of the city's numbers, we would be required to communicate that information to you. We are happy to say that the audit adjustments we did this year were your normal year-end accrual adjustments, and so those are things like accounts receivable, accounts payable, depreciation expense for capital assets, and then the big one that you often see now on the reports is the pension and the OPEB liabilities. And so that information comes from the state, but those are the entries we did, and we did not have any uncorrected adjustments this year. The next one talks about disagreements with management. So if during the audit we recommend something or we find something and management disagrees with us, we would be required to communicate that with council. And we are happy to say we did not have any disagreements this year with management. Our next slide talks about consultation with other accountants. We often refer to this as opinion shopping. So if we were to recommend something to management and they didn't like what we recommended, and we found out that they went and started talking to other auditors to see if they could get a different opinion, we would be required to communicate communicate that with you. And we're happy to say we're not aware of this occurring during FY21. So this is the slide, Mayor, that you just discussed. This talks about the current year findings. You will see the 6 findings on there. So we did have a finding related to IT general controls. This finding has been in existence since 2019. There has been some progress made on the finding. However, it's not been fully corrected. The next one relates to payroll disbursements. This was a new finding for FY21. The next relates to fuel cards. And then we had a conflict of interest finding. Finding number 5, the allowable cost, that is the one that relates to your federal single audit, so that federal CARES money. That is the finding that relates to that item. And then we had a finding for the procurement code. And so that is the last finding. We did have 2 findings in FY21 that originated in FY20 that were resolved by the city. So that means the city implemented the controls that were required to remove those. The first was related to the para RHC remittance. And then the second was adjustments to client-provided information. And so if you have questions or if you'd like me to go into further detail on the findings, we can most certainly do that.
So, going back to your elementary ed teaching, do we get a happy face or a sad face?
You get a happy face.
All right.
Yes.
That's good to hear. No, and I really appreciate your work, and I read the complete audit findings, and I'm understanding of all the citations, and you do a very good job at communicating those findings in the bigger text that we received.
Yes.
And I appreciate your company very much.
Thank you. We've always emphasized that we want to work with the city. Our goal is not to come in here and just write you up and disappear. Ultimately, we do want to point out what needs to be corrected, because we most certainly want to see that. But we also make recommendations. So if we see something that we believe is an issue, we make recommendations as to how we think it can be corrected. And this is based on experience with other municipalities and other governments that we say, this seems to be working there, so maybe it's something that could be implemented here. We do take into consideration size of staffing, because we understand, bigger cities may have more staff and things like that. And so we try to base our recommendations on that information.
Thank you. There are no questions or discussions. We'll move on. Mr. Mitchell?
I also would like to thank you guys for coming in, and I saw you working, sweating it out over here for about 2 weeks. All of you were all focused, and nothing, it seemed like nothing disturbed you guys.
We try.
I thank you for the good work, but I especially thank you for taking our input seriously. I know that's part of the audit, that council and mayor has an obligation to ask you guys for certain things to be looked at and so forth, and which you did. And I guarantee you that staff and the mayor and council have already started working on some of this stuff, some of these findings, either by ordinance or by policy. So we're one of those. I think Mayor Trujillo and myself, when we came in 20 years ago, the first time around, DFA was ready and willing to take over the city hall because of our finances. And we learned a hard lesson there, and we corrected things, and we moved forward. And since then, I think we've been doing pretty good this administration. So I thank you for all your work and for this audit. I know there's other audits that are pretty bad shape, and I've been there too, but this one's I think very fixable. Thank you.
I agree, and as always, as we get ready to gear up for this next FY22 audit, most certainly any concerns, issues, things that you feel the council that we need to look at, most certainly please bring it to our attention.
Thank you.
When is audit season again?
We are,
This was in August? No. This,
We'll be starting again August 1st.
I thought so.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
I'll be here for a week.
Okay. We may have some direction for the
Okay.
auditors as well.
Also, Mayor and Council, at any given time, you can even let me know and I can reach out to them if any questions concerning that.
Thank you, Dominic. Thank you, Ms. Nacero. We
Thank you.
really appreciate your time here.
Thank you.
And you're always welcome to Las Vegas.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And did you take back some tortillas from Charlie's?
Yes, when we come, we always make sure we stop, and that's one of our go-to places. We actually were just talking about that today. It's one of our go-to stops.
Yeah.
So,
Well,
yeah.
thank you so much.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, ready for a motion?
Ready for a motion?
Mr. Mayor, I move that we approve Resolution 22-17, which is the acceptance and approval of the fiscal year 2021 audit financial report.
There's a motion on the floor by Dr. Casey. Second, please.
Second, Mr. Mayor.
Second by Mr. Montoya. Roll call, please.
Counselor Ulibarri?
Yes.
Counselor Casey?
Yes.
Counselor Montoya?
Yes.
I have a motion by Counselor Casey, a second by Counselor Montoya. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Motion carries.
Thank you. Thank you once again.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor and Council.
Thank you, Dominic. I appreciate you.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Moving on to business item 2, request approval to purchase a dump truck for the Water Distribution Division. We have our Utilities Director, Maria Gilvery.
Mr. Mayor and Councilors, we did, but my staff is requesting, I am requesting to be able to purchase this dump truck for water distribution. We did include this in this current year's budget. It's approximately $112,572. We will use I believe it's state contract. We will be using the state contract to purchase this. This did go before the Utility Advisory Committee, and they did recommend approval. The warranty on this piece of equipment is going to be a 5-year, 250,000 miles. Of that, 3 years, 36,000 miles is the bumper to bumper, and then there's 2 additional years, or 214,000, to continue to warranty the engine.
This is brand new off the market?
This will be brand new. It'll actually be a 2023.
Thank you.
Which they will not start producing till the end of the year. So it's going to be approximately a year and a half before we see this, and we can only estimate right now. We have purchased vehicles in the last couple of years that have taken over a year to get them delivered.
Okay. What's the pleasure of the council?
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Ulibarri?
to approve item 2, approve for purchase of a dump truck for
Thank you.
Water Distribution Division.
There's a motion on the floor by Mr. Ulibarri. Second, please.
Second, Mr. Mayor.
Second by Mr. Montoya. Roll call, please.
Counselor Casey?
Yes.
Counselor Ulibarri Jr.?
Yes.
Counselor Montoya?
Yes.
I have a motion by Counselor Ulibarri, a second by Counselor Montoya. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Motion carries.
Thank you.
Moving on to item 3 is request approval of addendum number 3 to contract 3519-19 with SMA Operations LLC for professional services for operations and management for water treatment and wastewater professional services. Ms. Gilbert.
Mr. Mayor, Councilors, I request to approve addendum number 3. This will be the final addendum under this contract, so we will go back out for RFP. Sauter Miller has performed tremendous services for us in keeping our water and wastewater facility in compliance. The last 2 years, we've averaged about $550,000 being spent at the water treatment plant, and currently we have 3 Sauter Miller staff members there, and the average is $180,000 per year. Those are annual costs at the wastewater treatment plant. Over the last couple years, we've been able to, we've had one particular employee, but we have a few employees advance and become more, take more leadership role at the wastewater, which means I can pull the contracted services out. So I've been able to reduce the contracted services at the wastewater plant. At the water treatment plant, I've needed to continue to maintain the services that have been provided, which again have been tremendous in keeping us in compliance.
What are we doing to fill that position so it's no longer needed? I know it's one of those technical issues and it's a high technical training that somebody needs to go through and get licensed and certified, but I'm just wondering, these costs are exorbitant, and I can't see the city paying this for that long.
We've posted for several years. We've increased the pay scale tremendously. I worked with the previous city manager and current city manager to make sure that the pay scale was appropriate. And it is actually contingent upon the applicant's qualifications, so there is no fixed rate. If somebody comes in with tremendous qualifications, they can be higher on the pay scale. We've posted Municipal League, all water and wastewater associations, Doñana County, which has a water wastewater school. I know we've reached outside of the state because we did get, sometimes we do get responses. Unfortunately, they haven't met the city's needs. And we're also working on promoting from within. Like I said, at wastewater, we do have at least one employee who's taken the initiative to obtain at least 2 certifications in the last about a year. I'm also working with the president at Luna Community College for introducing some training, some schooling here locally to, again, try and either promote from within or possibly get some high school students. Those are long-term solutions, though. It's still a minimum of 6 years for somebody to go from introductory to having the certifications, and there is a difference between certification and qualification. Most of the time, by the time you're running a plant, you've already been working in the industry for 20 years, which unfortunately with PERA does put us at the end of many people's retirement plans, and we've had trouble getting people to stay longer.
When was the last time you advertised?
We continuously advertise.
Continuously?
Yes, continuously advertised. I have had some initial conversations with HR to see if we can reach out to some of these, I don't know what they call them now, but it used to be Monster, USA, a lot of these job entities across, but I know that you have to put a lot of money out to create an account for something like the city. And
I think in this case, I think it's a shotgun effort. I think we should do everything, including investing money in those platforms, the media platforms for job searching, because it's a high-level position. And I think it should be a shotgun approach to do whatever we can to get that person employed here. And so I don't think the council would have problems affording a cost for those media outlets so we can contract to advertise for that position. So what's the advertised salary for that position right now?
I believe it is a minimum of $60K a year. It is an hour. It is done at an hourly rate, and that's an estimation.
Are we in the ballpark?
Yes. A couple years ago, I did an analysis using the AWWA or regional, our regional pay scale, and that is in the ballpark. I do compare it to some other municipal governments, and it is in the ballpark. The challenge is the people. It's a really small group of people that are able to do
I
this.
totally understand. Isn't there a possibility of stealing an employee from Sutter Miller? Offering them a lucrative salary to move to Las Vegas?
Just like Sutter Miller will not cross that ethical
I know.
boundary and hire our employees away,
Mhm.
the city would not do that. And I think that'd be a little inappropriate to hire from Sutter Miller. Now, we continue to reach out to other
It's just
places.
a try.
I know, and I want to try everything. I also don't want to cross a line.
Yeah, I totally understand.
I think maybe one of the things I can talk to the city manager about is, are there any other kind of incentives that we can do? We don't normally provide hiring incentives, bonuses, or moving costs, but maybe that's something we can.
For what we're paying for this contract, for that position,
You're willing to move that?
absolutely. Offer them incentives, get them whatever. I mean, do whatever we can to get somebody here.
Yes, sir.
And, because that is a huge amount that we're paying to a company that we would hope that we would have an employee to do that for us. How much did we pay specifically for that position in the last year?
So just the one of the 3 Sutter Miller employees, I believe,
What ballpark?
I believe his rate is about $120 an hour.
Yeah, see, that's times
Now,
40
to
a
be
week,
clear,
times 80.
he wishes he got the 120, but
No,
it's
no.
a business, so.
No, yeah, it's part of the
But that's
contract.
what we're paying for contracted services.
for that much money that we're paying, I think we should do anything we can to attract that talent, those skills. So maybe we could rethink it and bump heads together and make sure that we have a good plan to get that position filled. That's eating a lot of our budget.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Well, thank you. What's the pleasure of the council?
Make a motion, Mr. Mayor, to approve appointment number 3, contract number 3519-19 with SMA Operations.
Thank you. There's a motion on the floor by Mr. Montoya. I'll entertain a second.
Second.
Second by Dr. Casey. Roll call, please.
Counselor Montoya?
Yes.
Counselor Olivari?
Yes.
Counselor Casey?
Yes.
I have a motion by Counselor Montoya, a second by Counselor Casey. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Motion carries.
Thank you for being here, Maria.
Thank you, Mr.
I
Mayor.
appreciate your work.
Next item is request approval of Resolution 22-19, applying for and assuring matching funds for the 2023 Transportation Project Fund for a total amount of $2,814,496.95. We have our Public Works Department Director, Arnold Lopez, and we have Danny Gurule, our Public Works Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Goudelet, and thank you, Arnold, for being here.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Council, Mr. Manager. So first of all, for the record, I'd like to note that there's a typo on the percent of DOTs. It actually should read 95% instead of 75% on the agenda. It is accurate on the resolution, on this item 4 and also on item number 5.
Okay.
Thank you.
Can we make sure that that's corrected for the minutes for next
Certainly.
week? Thank you. Go ahead, Mr. Ernie.
Okay, so we're here today to request approval of Resolution 22-19. We're applying for assuring for funding through the New Mexico Department of Transportation Project Fund in the amount of $2,814,496.95.
What would be our share?
Our share is 5% of that, which totals to $140,724.84. But we always apply for a match waiver, which we will do. And I know historically the cities has always gotten the match waiver. So,
Good.
so they are having that program again this year for match waiver.
So those are ADA compliance, curb and ramps, construction, management, drainage improvements, and miscellaneous improvements to University Avenue from Grand to 8th Street, and 8th Street from University Avenue to National Avenue. It's a big project.
Yes, sir. We're calling that the historical route
Yeah.
project. You know, it'll get us over to the historical part of Las Vegas.
What's the pleasure of the council?
Can I just make
Sure.
a comment? I don't have a question, but I have a comment. On the ADA compliance, would you please make sure that it really is ADA compliant? The parking areas along the park where handicapped people can exit their vehicles, if they park at a certain space, they cannot get out of their vehicle because those cement awful things that stick out into the middle of the street are there, and the person would have to go all the way around to the middle of the street where they are putting themselves in danger to be able to roll up their wheelchairs up that ramp. And with the ramp like this, and they have to come in through that, if anything happens and they can't control their wheelchair for some reason, and they tip over, they're SOL. And so, please, I've met with Mr. Maestas on that before on the park area, Plaza Park, and those are not truly ADA compliant at all. So I'm going to be watching is what I'm saying, because I think it's wrong. We need to make sure that we have actual ADA compliance for people that need those services. And the way things are now, it's not workable. So I would recommend that you take a wheelchair out there, try it out yourself, and see how it works. The crossings are convex, and same thing. If you're on a wheelchair, you're rolling right along, something happens, and you lose your balance, and you end up going to the convex part. That wheelchair is going to tip over, and the city is going to end up with a whole bunch of lawsuits because the ADA compliance really isn't compliant. So I ask that please, whoever is doing the work, that they actually do what they're supposed to do and make sure that it's done properly, because right now it's not.
Is
Thank
there
you.
something we could do with striping or reservations of parking for handicapped people at those ramps? I know that all the striping hasn't been completed, but is there something we can do to accommodate handicapped people better around the plaza with striping?
We are planning
I don't
on
think the
striping some
striping is
areas
gonna solve it, though.
strictly for handicap access.
Okay.
You have half a block in front of the drugstore, already designated for handicap.
And do they have proper accommodations to get their chair on a ramp to get into the park or do their business?
So if we identify the area that Mr. Montoya is talking about, they would access straight onto the sidewalk.
Okay.
Madam Councilor, I'm sure these two gentlemen here will testify that since we're getting 95% of the funding from the state and federal government, they have their own regulations that we gotta abide by. So, I mean, I was the first one to throw the flag in front of Encanto and all around the plaza area with our city manager on what was happening. But, and Maria took a beating on this too, because she was there every day. And, you know, what we were told is that they gotta follow their mandates, their statutes, federal government funding that comes down the channel. They have their own policies and their own rules and so forth. So, I mean, we were lucky to being able to change the one in front of Encanto and the one in the island to accommodate the handicap or the wheelchairs. But, I mean, that's a battle we had. I think that was the biggest battle we had around the Plaza Park project, was the accessibility for handicap and the ramps.
Thank you.
Well, I know that there are laws and regulations. However, I still don't think that they are done correctly or safely for handicapped people. And so I know that Mr. Bourdalet and Mr. Lopez will do their best to make sure that everything is done the way it's supposed to be according to law. However, I think maybe some of those people that come from the DOT need to sit in a wheelchair and try maneuvering those through what we have now. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Barbara.
I served 25 years with the DOT, and it's not the DOT, it's a federal government ruling.
Well,
It doesn't
still,
come
it's,
from
you
DOT.
know,
We just abide by
U.S.
the federal
Department of Transportation or
regulation.
whoever is
Yeah.
doing it.
Mr. Mayor, I would like to request approval of resolution number 2219, applying for the insurance matching funds for the 2023 transportation project, FPT. And I would like to also thank staff at this for putting in the application and not missing the deadline. Thank you.
Thank you. There's a motion on the floor.
I second the motion, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, by Mr. Montoya, second by Dr. Casey. Roll call, please.
Counselor Olivari?
Yes.
Counselor Montoya?
Yes.
Counselor Casey?
Yes.
I have a motion by Counselor Montoya, second by Counselor Casey. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Motion carries.
Thank you so much. Next order of business, please.
Item 5, request approval of Resolution 22-20, applying for and assuring matching funds for the 2023 Transportation Project Fund for a total amount of $2,622,636.38. Mr. Lopez?
Mr. Lopez?
So we are requesting approval again for this resolution 22-20, applying for these TPF funds in the amount of $2,622,636.38. Again, DOT's share is 95%, city share is 5%, in the amount of $131,131. $1,000,000.81. And it's basically for the same planning, designing, construction, reconstruction, pavement rehabilitation, and the required ADA compliant curb and gutter ramps, construction management, drainage improvements, and all miscellaneous improvements to El Creston Circle.
Thank you. What's the pleasure of the council?
Mr. Mayor, I move approval of Resolution 22-20 to apply for and assure matching funds for the 2023 Transportation Project Fund for the total of $2,622,636.38.
Thank you. There's a motion on the floor by Dr. Casey, second by Mr. Montoya. Roll call, please.
Counselor Montoya?
Yes.
Counselor Olivari?
Yes.
Counselor Casey?
Yes.
I have a motion by Counselor Casey, a second by Counselor Montoya. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate your work. Thanks for being here.
Next item is number 6, request approval to repeal and rescind resolution number 21-33. We have our Deputy Finance Director, Dominic Chavez.
Hello, Mayor Council.
You're back again.
I'm back again.
Welcome,
Finish off the
Dominic.
night. Yes, I'm here to request approval to repeal and rescind Resolution 21-33. Initially, it was to smash 6 vehicles, if I'm not mistaken, Chief?
Yes, sir.
As well as 60 ballistic vests and 17 tasers. Since that time, the Chief of Police has decided to go ahead and put these into our auction, yes, our online auction, which will be number 8.
Thank you. What's the pleasure of the council?
Mr. Mayor, question.
Mr. Montoya?
Chief, so the tasers, they're going to be on the auction too, or is there a process for those?
No, so the vest and the tasers are not going to be in the auction. Everything on this original destruction order is being removed. Just the vehicles on the list are being auctioned.
Okay,
But
so those other items will come before us at a later date?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
What's the pleasure of the council?
Make a motion to repeal and rescind resolution number 22-33. Is it good, Mr. Mayor?
There's a motion on the floor by Mr. Montoya, second by Mr. Ulivari. Roll call, please.
Counselor Casey?
Yes.
Counselor Olivari?
Yes.
Counselor Montoya?
Yes.
I have a motion by Counselor Montoya, a second by Counselor Olivari. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Motion carries.
Thank you.
Next, item 7, request approval of Resolution 22-22. This is a budget adjustment for the 2021-2022 fiscal year. Mr. Dominic.
Yes, Mayor and Council, I'm requesting approval for 22-2022 to, as a revenue and expense increase to the senior center in the amount of $101,825. 35,000.01 is for homemaker, 34,999 is for chore, and 31,825 is for connect to me for the senior center.
Okay. Questions, discussion? What's the pleasure of the council?
Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Montoya?
This item did go also through the Finance Committee, and I make a motion to approve resolution 22-22.
Thank you. There's a motion on the floor by Mr. Montoya. I'll entertain a second, please.
Second.
Second by Dr. Casey. Roll call, please.
Counselor Olivari?
Yes.
Counselor Montoya?
Yes.
Counselor Casey?
Yes.
I have a motion by Counselor Montoya, a second by Counselor Casey. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Motion carries.
Again, Dominic.
One last round. Thank you.
Request approval of Resolution 22-21, the sale of obsolete city assets at an online auction.
Yes, here to request the approval of 22-21 for that online auction, please.
Mr. Mayor, I move that we approve Resolution 22-21 to sell obsolete city assets on an online auction.
Thank you. There's a motion on the floor by Dr. Casey, second by Mr. Ulivari. Roll call, please.
Counselor Montoya?
Yes.
Counselor Casey?
Yes.
Counselor Olivari?
Yes.
I have a motion by Counselor Casey, a second by Counselor Olivari. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Motion carries.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor. I would just have one request that when the auction does happen, that we go back on this list and make sure that everything is deducted or decreased off the fixed asset listing.
Oh, yes.
Because we just approved that a couple of meetings ago, and we had a lot of stuff that has already been done, that's still on that listing.
Right.
And it's hurting us for requesting for funding. So thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you, Mayor. Thanks, Council.
Thank you, Dominic. I appreciate your work.
Yes, sir, thank you for sure.
Thank you. What's the pleasure of the council? The next order of business is executive session. If there's no need, I'll move for adjournment.
Mr. Mayor, I would like to go into executive session to discuss personnel matters.
There's a motion on the floor by Mr. Montoya to go into executive session. Second, please.
Second, Mr. Mayor.
Second by Mr. Olivari. Roll call, please.
Counselor Olivari?
Yes.
Counselor Montoya?
Yes.
Counselor Casey?
Yes.
Have a motion by Counselor Montoya, second by Counselor Olivari. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Motion carries.
Thank you. If you can vacate the gallery for now, we appreciate you being here. You're always welcome to attend.
The motion to convene back to regular session, limited personnel matters according to New Mexico SA 1978, 10-15-1.
Thank you. And for the record, there was no action taken. Thank you. There's a motion on the floor by Mr. Montoya. I'll take a second. Dr. Casey, second. All in favor?
Aye.
Make a motion to adjourn, Mr. Mayor.
Second.
Motion, second by Mr. Ulibarri. All in favor?
Aye.
Meeting's adjourned. Thank you. Thank you, gentlemen. Appreciate your work.